Welcome to hashtag 52 Boundaries. And this week we are talking about money. And I am so delighted to have with me my friend Heather Mitchell, who's a money mentor. Hello, Heather.
Hi, Angela. How's it going?
Oh, really well. So we're talking about money, a topic that's really, really important at the moment with the way the world is going. And we have, on one hand, we've got fear. On the other hand, we've got excessive spending, and there's everything in between. So let's talk about some boundaries. So you mentor people in money. So what are the things that you notice in people at the moment?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of fear around for sure. The main thing that people are particularly worried about is all the inflation. The prices are getting higher and higher and higher, that is something which is, directly affecting people. So, yeah, it's definitely something that is affecting everybody.
Yeah. And how do people react? I mean, what are the patterns that you observe? I mean, I know that some people go into absolutely rigid boundaries. So they start, like almost, I don't like the word as sex, but they become very tight with money, like a Scrooge. They count every penny that they have. And then there are other people who go, you know what? I'm abandoning all my boundaries. I'm buying everything I can on credit. I'm maxing out my credit card because I don't know what's going to happen. So therefore, Afterpay is a good option.
Yeah, I mean, you just get different reactions. It's either this sort of victim mentality, like, oh my God, why is this happening to me? And just sort of almost closing off and just kind of going into one shell, or there's this sort of deflection thing where it's just like, well, it's, it's somebody else's fault. It's the economy. It's, I wasn't educated properly. It's like, oh, it's my partner's fault. He overspends, or, and just not sort of taking kind of the, the baton. And then there's the sort of head in the sand, just like, oh, it's nothing, it's not, nothing's happening. This is absolutely normal, look the other way and deflect it. And, or it's this like, just spend. So it's just different things. You kind of see different kind of attitudes to it. I mean, some people, the ideal, I guess, is to get sort of, just balanced. I mean, there's always two sides to every story, and there's always opportunities to be had. So I think it's just trying to sort of work your way through all this kind of noise, and just find some things, because when you've got volatile times, then some things do very well in volatile times. So it's just a case of trying to pick and choose and look at trends. Trends are your friends. So it's just, if one can get comfortable with data and just seeing the things that go up when everything else goes down, some things actually go up. Like, those are the things that you want to grab hold of right now.
Well, I know that from we've talked about this before. You had the benefit of having parents who started you on the investment path at a very young age.
That's it.
Who encouraged you to learn about money. I mean, how many people do you know who learned about money, like from an early age?
Very few. I mean, I didn't really talk about it myself because it just wasn't talked about, but just, from my, client's perspective, hardly anyone. I mean, even ones that actually had parents that did know about investing and did really well, it didn't necessarily translate that they would actually explain it to their children.
Yeah.
So yeah, very, very few do I actually. I mean, some people did, of course, but it's the definite minority, unfortunately.
Yeah. I know that my father was did investments, but he never passed that knowledge down to us. There at one point he gave us some money and said, here you go, here's some money, there you go. And he said, pays good interest, and you can go on a holiday with this every year. And I was like, looking back 20 years later, I should have invested that, but again, learned the hard way. I did all sorts of courses and learned all of these things later in life than I would have liked to. So my passion now is to say to people, if you're aware of your boundaries around money, and if you know that money is not something that gratifies you in the moment, but that is also, it's good to have some sort of context in which you want to use money now and in the future, to have that would be really, really useful.
I think that's right. It's like jam today and jam tomorrow. Of course, you need to attend to your needs right now. But if you can't keep a little eye onto the future, then you're missing out on something, basically your future self is going to suffer, because you need to be cognizant of that time when you will need it in the future.
Yeah, we talked about this earlier. A lot of people think that somebody's going to take care of them. We have had this whole, the government will pay you will pay you retirement. There will be enough money, but the world population is changing so much, and it's becoming so top heavy with older people that we're not going to get the pension that we have been promised, or that we have paid in for and into a fund for. So, I mean, people are really afraid, I think, that they're not going to be provided for, but at the same time, they don't know how to set the boundaries around that. And this is the conversation I'd like to have. It's about saying, what can we do to actually make sure that we're doing something that's constructive and proactive to manage money?
Well, that's right. I mean, just to talk about your point, I think when they originally started all the pensions, they only thought people would live, 60 years or something. It was just they totally got that wrong. And so when the life expectancy went up, they just literally did not. It was always about the younger people paying for the older people. But then, as you say, that ratio is totally gone off the rails. So, yeah, I mean, as I said, it's keeping that eye on the future and making sure that it's not something that you take off the boil, because I think it's one of these things that it's a kind of sometimes it goes in the too hard basket. I don't know what to do, so I'm just going to kick that down the road and think about it some other time, because it just feels like I really don't know what to do. And especially with this volatility, it's just like you just get caught in the headlights.
Yeah,
it's almost like more important, I think, to really attend to it, because you just never know. You just need to actually put things in place, right now. It's almost like that becomes the priority. It doesn't go to the bottom of the list. It actually goes to the top.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's very, very important to sort of think about things and as I said, work out what is working right now so that you can set yourself up for the future.
Yeah. I had a friend of mine's son was 18, and there was he wanted to move out, and his parents said, can you do a budget with him? So we sat down. He said, I don't need a budget. So I said, let's do it anyways. And I said, let's just work out what you need. And it was like $50 for alcohol, $50 for gaming a week. Right. And I said, and then there is tolls and car insurance. Oh, mom and dad are going to pay for that. No, we're not going to operating on that model that they will, but we're going to look at how much would you need to earn in order for you to maintain the lifestyle that you think you would like to have right now. And it turned out that it was absolutely, completely undoable. And I still remember the look on his face when he looked at that. And when I said, okay, so let's look at what can you cut for the moment, but not to the point where you are going into misery, but let's be reasonable about that. Do you need $50 for gaming, or, so much money for alcohol and all of that? So talking about what he can do to earn extra money in order to make that happen. Again, I mean, I always remember Robert Kiyosaki going to his wife and saying, I'd like to buy this car. And she said, what asset are you going to create that's going to pay for that? Beautiful. Right?
Love it.
And so these kind of conversations, we don't have them with people.
Absolutely. And I think that, everybody should do that exercise. It's so useful, because you just don't know. You don't know what you don't know. And until you look at your numbers, it's astonishing. It's astonishing. And when you see the numbers, it actually is very telling on what your priorities are. It's fascinating. I had one client who, it was really quite sad, but her father, he only ever complimented her mother or her when they looked nice, looked pretty. So she developed this absolute obsession with buying clothes, and she just spent thousands a month. I couldn't even believe it, and it was just like, and she didn't even realize it was an issue at all. And then until somebody points it out, and it's just like, oh, right, you know, wow.
Mm.
So now, I mean, like, she literally has saved herself thousands. I mean, that money she's put into a house now, because like literally she can go shopping in her own closet, you know, and she has the most beautiful dresses and shoes.
Yes.
But you know, it's amazing. And these are the types of things, unless unless you're pointed out to, that you get into these habits, you know, once it becomes a habit, you stop thinking about it because it just becomes automatic. So it's almost like you have to jolt yourself out of that, you know, just the trance, I guess, and look at it for what it is.
The problem is the world is making it very difficult for us to do that. When you've got spongy boundaries, like this woman you just described, who wanted the approval of her father, and you know, all of this outside recognition of, you know, this is, I look good, therefore that's keeping up with the Joneses as well. You know, I have clients who have the 5-bedroom houses, the kids go to private school, they go on holidays twice a year, they have all of these patterns, and they're stressed completely out of their minds, not because they're not earning that money, but because they have to keep earning that money in order to make it happen. But in the meantime, they don't get to see their kids, their marriage is going down the drain, they don't have any social relationships because it's all about competition, you know, who's looking the best, and they're supremely unhappy. But it's all about, again, you know, like instant gratification. You can buy this now, or yes, we have afterpay, you can pay it off as you go. You know, we used to have, I don't even know what it's called, lay-by. You know, we don't do lay-by anymore.
What's lay-by?
You buy something, you know, they put it aside for you, and they give it
right.
once you've paid it off.
Right, yeah.
Right?
Interesting.
That's what my parents used to do with me. You want this? There's the lawn, mow the lawn. There's the car, wash the car, save the money. We'll check in with you when you're getting close. And then we may add a little bit of extra to show that we recognize how well you've been doing. But it was, you know, if I didn't do it, they were not going to give it to me necessarily.
Absolutely. And all the values that you learn from that, you know, you actually learn how valuable money is. And I think that that's the thing. And there was this really great book called A Millionaire Next Door, where he talks about that. He talks about how parents giving their children houses is not necessarily doing them a favor, because they quite often, they're in neighborhoods they couldn't ordinarily afford, so they've got to keep up with the Joneses, they've got to buy the right car, they've got to buy the right clothes, you know, and they could never ever build that money themselves. And so they're actually disempowered because they're stuck in this sort of trap that they can never get out of. So it's interesting, it just it's double-edged. You think you're doing your children a favor, whereas actually they're not getting the skills they actually need to survive in life.
Yeah. Oh God, I remember sitting there going, why everybody else is getting this, and why do I have to work for this? And my father said, and my mother went. It was just, and I'm grateful. I am really grateful, because I'm also one of those people that my friends don't understand. If it's my birthday and I get packages beforehand, you know, they arrive in the mail, I put them aside, and everybody goes, so are you going to open it? Like, it's not my birthday yet. They go, yeah, but you could open it now. No, it's not my birthday yet. But don't you want to know what's in it? No, it's not my birthday yet.
I love that. Yeah, it's that instant gratification, and you know, it's so character building if you can wait. You know, if you can build, and you know, and that feeling of achievement when you've saved up for something and then you actually buy it, rather than these afterpay and all these other sort of, you know, innovations that are, you know, all very well. But again, you know, if you need to use afterpay, because they're normally for smaller amounts, if you need to use afterpay, then you shouldn't be using it. It's as simple as that. It's quite frightening. You know, look how much debt the world is in because of innovations like that.
Yeah. Credit card, another really bad example. I mean, you can have, when somebody has soft boundaries or spongy boundaries, so soft as I really don't have any boundaries. It's just, I'm just spending like crazy. I'll treat my friends at the pub for, you know, one round after another, or I do stuff with people that I can't really afford, go on holidays because I can hang out with people. Or the spongy boundaries, again, you know, I buy stuff that I can't really afford. So that when you talk to people like that, then it's going to be really difficult for them to understand that, sometimes it's really good to say no. But I wanted to make another point and I've just lost it. What was I talking about it before? It doesn't matter.
We'll come back to it.
But it is about the fact that when you teach people how to manage money and when they have boundaries around money, then they can use credit cards. That was my point. They use credit cards like debit cards, right? And I've seen people who literally just pay off the minimum amount of their credit card at 22% interest.
Oh, I know, it's insane.
And
insane.
And it's really, really challenging when somebody has that. And it's really challenging when you're in a marriage where one person has an attitude towards money that is more towards, let's pay it off like a debit card every month. And the other person goes, but this is so lovely, let's buy this.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I do actually do couples work, which is so interesting because, for once in their lives, they actually hear about their partner's money stories. Like they didn't even know, because you don't really talk about it in those terms. Like, oh, how was money for you? What happened when you were a child? You just don't really think about it in those terms. And so they're listening to each other's money stories for the very first time. And then it's like, oh, that's why you do that. Oh my God, and it's suddenly like, I remember just the other day, someone come up to me who had coached them as couples. And she said, I've lived with my partner for 5 years and literally I knew nothing about him in those terms, like, and then she said, but now they say to each other, what would Heather say? I think it's quite amusing. So but yeah, I mean, it's really powerful. And but I sometimes, what's magical is that when people understand, oh, they've got the spongy boundaries, or I think about it in terms of spender or defender, that's a sort of similar kind of terminology. When they know what they are, again, that's empowering, because then they can make a decision. Do they want to be like that? Do they want to be sort of cavalier about it? Or do they actually, can they put some boundaries in place to be able to kind of go, oh, okay, maybe I don't need to buy this right now. Maybe I can, wait for this. Or, sometimes when you wait, you realize you don't even want it. If you have that pause.
Exactly.
In between that moment of inspiration and then the actual point of actually giving them the credit card,
because they already know. I mean, there have been lots of studies that show that you only have that feeling of owning something and getting the joy out of it. It's basically for the first 5 minutes of owning it, and then the joy goes down exponentially. And it just, I mean, our telecommunications company Telstra here, they created a product where I literally went, oh, you must be kidding me. The new phone feeling. So you could have a phone plan where you would automatically upgrade to a new phone every single year. I mean, environmentally, it's a disaster. But B, this addiction to new is just, it's just being created by that. And again, and if you've got credit card and you just put money on credit cards, that's such a big risk.
Well, it's these corporations that cause these problems. Like I remember it was in the 80s that the IKEA did their chuck out your chintz campaign, because before that you would keep your couch and your sofa for your whole marriage. You would just buy one and it would just last you. And they gave people permission to get rid of the old fashioned things and then put whatever they want, and becomes a throwaway commodity. They've got such a lot to answer to, because it's, how much furniture must there be just on landfills galore? I mean, it just blows the mind, really. It's just
absolutely. So let's have a quick chat about what kind of guidelines would be really used to put in place to have flexible boundaries. Because I mean, we've gone soft, as in spend whatever. We've gone rigid. I'm not spending anything at all, which is also a really bad thing, because you can cut yourself off from potentially life-saving, or, again, life is a little bit more than just eating bread and water, drinking water. So I'm in favor of having some healthy food and stuff. We talked about that before. Again, just having a look at what is reasonable, what is unreasonable. And then whether you are actually, with your soft boundaries, are you modeling yourself on other people? Are you keeping up with the Joneses? And do you flip into scarcity every now and then and go into, again, into bread and water? And when we talk about flexible boundaries, what kind of things do you recommend?
Well, I think it just kind of rewinding on that, because I think that ultimately we're all emotional beings, the emotions run the show. I mean, obviously that's your thing, but it's so important, because when we understand how we relate to money and what emotions that evoke, that can, because so many people have trauma with regards to money. This is the fundamental problem, is that either you, or maybe it's your parents or family members or even ancestry, had some sort of traumatic incident with money, which really does impact your everyday life. Like, you don't even realize it, but the result of that is you either mistrust money, or there's pain around it, there's fear about it, or even some sort of hatred. It's as big as that. So if you don't deal with that, you're kind of, you don't want more of that. Yes, I want more money, but I don't want more of the stuff that goes around it. So that's why people might not be rushing to invest or do all these things, because there's so much trauma around it that, what would happen if, there's just too much sort of stuff around it. So I think the first real important thing is to sort of understand that relationship you have with money, and really try and heal those wounds. Those wounds are just because they're running the show at the moment. Those parts of you that are just in pain, or I mean, I've been guilty of it myself. The amount of times I've stood in my own way. I remember I was offered 2 jobs, one more senior than the other, and I took the more junior one. It's like, my husband's like, what did you do that for? It's like, I know I can do that one. It's like, well, I wouldn't have done that. It's just like, these kinds of things, multiplied over time, are detrimental, big time, but it's there's stuff going on. There's stuff going on underneath. There's fear and all the rest of it. So just really understanding, the roles of play I talked about before, the victim role or whatever, hiding your head in the sand, just understand how you are around that. Because then when you come to doing the next thing, which was, talking about the boundaries and all of that, it just becomes so much more easy, because you've already dealt with some of the trauma that's gone alongside it. And, we talk about money stories, and really understanding and piecing together that.
And be aware of the fact that, again, I mean, I had this some time ago. I had started having real anxiety around money. And it was really, and I know myself quite well. I mean, I can surprise myself, but I know myself quite well. And it didn't feel like me. It didn't feel like my thing. So I worked with somebody who specializes in clearing beliefs, and identified very quickly that my sense that this wasn't mine was actually true. It was something that had been epigenetically passed on from my grandmother and my grandparents on both sides of the family, who had to escape and were running from bombs exploding 100 meters behind them, had left everything behind, who got bombed out twice during World War II, came out of it with absolutely nothing, who were people, the breadwinners in the family died, and the women had to find ways of, literally surviving.
Oh my God.
So there was a lot of trauma around money. And so we cleared that. And I can tell you, my life changed after that.
Wow, that is so powerful.
So these are the kind of things that really make a difference, because the boundaries we set ourselves around this and the beliefs that we have, not necessarily our own. We can take trauma with us for up to 4 generations. It gets passed down. So as you said, when you're aware of your money history and your family, how they deal with it, it makes such a big difference.
It's game changing, really. you know, and, you know, there's just so many examples. But yeah, I mean, there was one client I worked with, and she had to come from a family where there was just all the women in her history had never worked, and she was the first person that worked and had her own business things, and there was just a lot of guilt around that, you know. So again, it's like, you know, standing in her own way.
Yeah,
it's like, should I really be doing this? So yeah, I mean, there's just so many examples of that. But if you can just understand, you know, just that clarity alone can just be so useful. But also, you know, understanding those emotions, understanding who's actually running the show, and just being able to give that emotion the space and the ability to do what it needs to do, because everything has a message, everything is there for a reason. So if it just has an ability to actually go through the body, rather than it's just pushing it down, squashing it like, oh, it doesn't matter, it's just not important, it's like really important to learn the lessons, hear the messages, and just let it go through and then out the other side.
Again, it's having these agreements with yourself and saying, okay, if there's something that I really, really want, you know, I'm coveting it, I'm just let it sit for 24 hours, right? Or have agreements with your partner. That's what I used to have with my ex-husband. We had an agreement that we could individually, we could spend up to a certain amount, but anything above that, we would have to talk about before. And if it went beyond another certain amount, we would have to let it sit for 24 hours at least before we made a commitment.
Love it. Again, these are just little things that you can do that really makes a difference. One really good trick is to, you know, again, talking about credit cards, is to actually put a credit card in a metal bowl, fill it with water, and then freeze it in the freezer. And so you can't put it in the microwave, so that's out. So you have to literally wait for it to defrost. And in that time, you've got that chance to really review and think that you really want it. But yeah, I've got lots of methodologies to kind of really question that, you know, how much do I want it? And, you know, and just empowering yourself, because I think so, you know, the marketing is so strong. We are being bombarded with campaigns all the time. So if you can get that resilience and actually be able to sort of fend it off and just kind of go, no, I'm not going to buy that. You know, I was tempted, but no, and that there's something really strong in that.
Yeah. I don't follow it always. I have to admit that. Generally, my guideline is if I buy something new, I have to throw something else out. So if it's, you know, like if I want to buy a new sweater, it's because there's one that I really don't wear anymore for whatever reason. So it's not this is a cheap sweater, I think I'm going to buy that, but it's like, what is it going to replace? And that really helps. I mean, we just had the curbside collection. My neighbors had all sorts of stuff, and I looked at it and went, I don't have anything to throw out.
Nice. Yeah. Well, I mean, that's one good thing about living in Australia, is like this. It's like a free-for-all. Some of the things people throw out are just incredible. Yeah. I've got this lovely sort of garden table and chairs that was brand new, like no, they hadn't even been used. Mirrors and table. I mean, God, so many things. It's just been brilliant. So, but it's incredible that people can just be so dismissive of stuff, you know, and things that they'd obviously had to pay a lot of money for at one stage, and it's just gone to nothing. Like, again, there's no value attached to it. There's no ability to understand the energy that's surrounded in that thing.
Yeah. So again, notice what you've got, start valuing it, not from quantity, but from quality and what it fulfills in your life. And it's not because somebody else, you can impress somebody else with it, or you can, you know, impress yourself with it, as in, look at me, I can afford this. But what does it really mean? And is it going to contribute to your happiness in 5 minutes, in 5 months, in 5 years? You know, sometimes putting a longer time frame on it actually makes a difference as well. So there are lots and lots of different things that you can do. The trick is to sit down and actually have a look at, how do you deal with money, right?
That's self-awareness, you know, just being able to really, you know, just get a peace with yourself, you know, because at that point where you don't have to impress anyone anymore, that's just such a wonderful feeling when it's just like, it really doesn't matter. you know, and then getting even clearer, like you said, and understanding, do I just want this, or do I actually need it? Because that is streets away from each other. If you can really know what you actually need, then you could disregard, you know, 90% of the things that you were interested in. Like my son is forever asking me to buy things. Like if I bought everything he asked for, like God knows where we'd be, because he's just like, you know, totally just like this. I mean, actually, he's getting a bit better. Actually, he actually does understand the value of money more. But over the years, it's like ridiculous, you know. But so you just, like you said, you have to put boundaries in. You have to really understand, you know, what you're about and what's important, and then everything else just comes from that.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Heather. That was a really inspiring conversation, and hopefully it was useful for people watching this just to have a think about what your relationship with money is like, and where do you spend, where do you not spend, where do you overspend, where do you underspend, you know, all of these things. Where do you have agreements with your partner, where do you not, where do you make up a partner in order to bow out of purchases, which I've seen. Need to confer with Ricky about this before I buy this. Ricky was the poodle, but that's okay. So just see how it works, because when you've got boundaries around money, life becomes really less stressful. I think that would be my takeaway.
That sounds like a brilliant takeaway. You know, just getting understanding of yourself, your relationship with money, and then everything else comes to that. And just, you know, and just educating yourself. I think that's the other thing, is just knowing what the possibilities are, and actually taking action.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Heather. Thank you everybody for watching and listening. And I hope this was useful, and I'll see you soon.